Call us back into session from our recess, and again, we are in motions and notices. And at this time, I'm going to invite Mr. Potts to return to the podium for any questions or review questions for you. If you have any answers for us at this time, whatever you have in hand, we'll appreciate it.
Mr. Speaker, I don't really have authority to ask for a word, but it's going to be a committee of the whole.
Need to go into committee of the whole, because they're discussing.
A motion and a second to go into committee as a whole. Those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed, say no. We are in committee as a whole. Mr. Potts, would you please share with us any new news?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Upon review, I did a few initial calculations. According to ONCR 1625, which is the resolution that sets projected revenue, with the bills that were filed today, specifically those for the executive, judicial, and legislative branches of government, it would not put us over that projected revenue amount outlined in ONCR 1625.
Could you repeat that statement, please?
The operating budgets that were submitted today would, if those were to pass through Congress, according to ONCR 1625, that would not put us over projected revenue.
Thank you. Questions? Congresswoman Edwards.
Are there other bills that have been filed with appropriations that would cause, if passed, would cause us to exceed the amount stated in ONCA 1625? Or the resolution?
It was ONCR 1625.
Sorry, Carl.
The answer to that question is yes. There are bills that have been filed that would push us over that amount.
And what bills are those?
I do not have those reference numbers at this time.
Do you know what they're for?
I believe that I know one of them is for, it'd be burial assistance fund, which I do have the number for, and that is ONCA 1673.
Okay, and I filed two today that are for the Higher Education Scholarship Fund in the amount of $8 million, and the health benefit appropriation to Health Benefit Fund for $5 million. And then I think Speaker Mason filed one today for, is it 300 or 400?
300.
300. So you'll get those on our spreadsheets and we'll be able to see that.
Yes.
Those will cause us, if you take all those, that will cause us to go over the projection in ONCR 1625.
Correct. ONCR 1625, by my calculations, does not also, there are some numbers left out of that calculation. So you could absolutely go over that amount if those bills were to pass.
Thank you. Congresswoman Buffalohead.
Yeah, that was my question, was those bills that were filed today are pieces of legislation that are direct services to the Osage people, that serve all Osage people. And that with those numbers, it would push us over.
The response, please.
To my knowledge, yes. It's the Burial Assistance Fund, as Congressman Edwards has stated, it would be the Higher Education Fund, Health Benefit Fund. There are two other appropriation requests that the executive has made. One would be for the campus master plan, to the tune of $1.2 million. And then the Capital Asset Improvement Fund, which I believe is around $450,000.
Thank you, Mr. Baker and Mr. Thomas.
Mr. Potts, are you going to give us that printout that you're looking at right there, or can we have a number, because I have not heard these go by, has it changed? According to what Assistant Chief said today, there were additional funds to be added, I guess, to the projected revenue?
Mr. Potts.
Thank you. That becomes difficult territory for me to provide calculations. Currently, the Appropriations Committee does not have those funds set out in a committee report or in a new resolution. So the resolution that is before Congress is measured by ONCR 1625. So I can provide that information.
What is that number? Just can you give me the number that you're going by right now? What's on that paper?
The number that's contained in ONCR 1625 is 47,330,000.
Mr. Superintendent, and then Ms. Edwards.
Well, how close were we to going over?
With Mr. Cox. Thank you. Leaving out the 1.8 million for the health clinic, it would be around $2.7 million to the good. If we factor in the amount for the health clinic, it's about $4.5 million to the good, as measured to ONCR 1625, before we start adding in the direct assistance funds.
Well, from what I heard just now, when those bills were filed, won't we be over that projection by a substantial amount of money? I mean, like about $6 million or something?
Mr. Potts.
My initial calculation of that as a tentative number that has not been put into a report was roughly, around $10 million yet.
10.
That's, it's important to remember these things. It's a projection. It is a projection based solely on as legislation has been filed by Congress. It's not a reflection of anything that has passed. So it's just to monitor what has been filed by Congress.
Councilwoman Edwards and then Congressman Shaw.
Well, we all were here in the spring when we said we told you so. We knew this was coming. And it's gonna have to take some substantial reductions in order to do this. And I would ask everybody to look at the merit bill, proposal. But we're gonna have to, I think we're gonna need these committees of the whole a lot, because I don't think one committee can go down this trail and another committee go down that trail with respect to budgeting. I think we need to have a united plan and say, this is what we're going to do as a group, make this decision, and then implement it in the committees. That would be my suggestion.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My comment to add to Mr. Potts' comments are in the area of other revenue. They're not currently contained within the projected tribal revenue, and certainly not our official report, although my intent is during the Appropriations Committee meeting tomorrow, we're going to make revisions to the projected tribal revenue report, and with a resolution, read it in on Monday. Okay? But there are some numbers that technically aren't always included. We will include one of the numbers on Monday, so you will have it to see in detail. Is that the chief mentioned we had 1.9 million in unappropriated monies from this last fiscal year, and then the tribal carryover from FY 2015 is 2.9 million. Not usually part of the projected tribal revenue, but they will be monies to help offset any overages we have, or they could be brought to bear to be applied to any appropriation budgets. So there are other monies, but it's not 10 million, 4.9.
Ms. Edwards and then Mr. Superintendent.
And those numbers are being verified in writing by the treasurer, right? Because that was my problem with talking about putting, for example, the clinic revenue at 3.4 million versus the 1.2 or 1.8 that was given to us in April. What has changed? And I think somebody in a position of knowledge should present that evidence of what has changed, because how could you have been that far off 3 months ago? And I don't understand that. So, I want to hear how that is, as an example, that we are somehow $3 million off in our projection, or I guess $2 million off in our projection of what the clinic was going to.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent and Mr. Shaw.
Well, even with that money that you say is coming in, it still looks like it's 5.2 million short. So, $6 million over projected income. Later on, I heard it was even larger than that, and I don't know where I'm going with this, but I mean, we knew it was coming, and now what we will do about it.
Thank you. Mr. Shaw?
I just want to respond to my colleague's question about the projection for the third-party revenue for the health clinic. The 1.8 came from, that was what the Huska Clinic, when operated by the Indian Health Service, had received for their third-party building the year before the nation assumed operation of the clinic or compacted. Based on their experience and income for this year, going through some lean periods as they got insurance contracts into place and so forth, they felt comfortable in projecting the increase in third-party revenue to 3.1 million. And as you might remember, that was always the prediction for a compacted clinic, is that the way to improve health programs, et cetera, was the promise of third-party revenue increasing steadily each year to a certain amount. I mean, there's going to be a limit, but it would allow us to put, in this case, 1.3 million of additional revenue for services and equipment that otherwise would have had to come from tribal funds.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards?
So is all of that revenue, that third-party revenue, is that committed only to the health division, or is it unencumbered, if you will, revenue?
Mr. Shaw? I know the Office of Inspector General has ruled on this because by law, it is third-party revenue from a self-governance compacted tribe to the Indian Health Service. Those monies are earmarked and restricted to spending. I know that's sort of a bad word, restricted, but restricted to be spent on health-related services.
And do we have a copy of that, Inspector General?
I have it on file. I'll look it up and print out some copies
We should get that.
because it's pretty solid. And I think we probably should have that in Osage law, so there's no confusion about it.
Okay.
So legislative council is working with us on such a bill.
Thank you. Ms. Whitehorn?
Well, in one of our appropriation committees, and I invite anybody to refresh my memory or correct me, I believe that we asked the controller about that third-party revenue, and he did state that we have already exceeded the $1.8 million that was in that projection. And I think it's gonna be well into the $2 million range. And I didn't retain or write the numbers down, but the projection from last year has already been exceeded, from my understanding.
Okay, one more question. Do you have any questions? Anybody else of Mr. Potts?
I was just gonna ask, are you saying,
Councilman Edwards and Assistant Chief.
I don't understand what you're saying. They projected for FY17 that they were going to make $1.6 million in third-party billing. That was the projection for FY17 when they gave it to us.
I'm talking about what they projected for FY16 of last year, which I believe was $1.8 million in their program for department budget. That 1.8 that they projected as other income and revenue from their third-party billing, is my understanding, has been exceeded.
So are they gonna ask us?
FY16.
They're gonna ask us to appropriate those funds out additionally then?
Well, of course, that's how it should happen, but I didn't ask that question.
Okay.
Assistant Chief and then Mr. Supano.
Mr. Potts, do you have a worksheet that reflects the work that you're commenting on that?
That's right.
Do you have a worksheet that reflects the comments that you're making now?
I do.
Could we have a copy of that, please?
That is a congressional document. I'll be happy to provide it to the clerk.
Thank you.
Mr. Supano.
I'd like to ask Congresswoman Edwards or Eli, whoever knows. You had Congresswoman Edwards handed me a bill just a while ago that I think it's to more accurately describe projected revenue. If that bill passes, is that going to contribute to the deficit? I mean, the recognized deficit, it's not gonna change the numbers, but is it gonna be even worse if that passes?
So,
As you recall from when this bill was discussed in the spring and didn't make it out, the Congress recognized that that part of the merit bill, or the Pay for Performance Act that's in place right now, has this market study that happens every 2 years or 3 years. And that we were advised in the spring that that market study may result in as much as a 16% across the board suggested revision upward in salaries. And we discussed with the HR director at that time that the law required that the HR director make recommendations in consideration of the fiscal well-being and possible increase revenue of the nation. Well, we don't have any increased revenue. So matter of fact, we have decreased revenue. So I was surprised when we received these budgets that I think the assistant principal chief said yesterday, correct me if I'm wrong, assistant principal chief, that, good afternoon, that we had that there was a 16% proposed increase across the board, or on average, in the salary requests that were made for this year, and you reduced it to 8, but then it could go as high as 12 if projected revenue is revised upward. Can you help me out on that?
That's what I said. What I did say was that in the first iteration of the budget that we went through, prior to the Executive Order 1604, that there was only room for an 8% allowance across the board per division for salaries
Increase.
increase.
An
So
8%
the first iteration had an 8% increase. After 1604, and the freeing up of the money that had previously been spent on surveillance, that was increased to 12%.
Okay, so these budgets that we have represent a 12% across the board by division increase in salaries.
Yes, and I will confess to have heard 2 percentages for what was actually in the market survey, and one was 16 and one was 17. 16, I believe, is the latest information that was provided to me.
Okay, and can I ask you one more question? Do you know the percentage of increase or decrease in direct services that's
I do not.
presented? Or in operations expense outside of salaries?
I don't have those numbers. in front of
And
me.
then the benefits increase is something like 50%?
I think the Congress is in receipt of a letter that explains most of that, but I'm not going to verify that that's the number. I have not committed them to them.
So to answer your question, Congressman Supernall, this does not require, this bill does not require a merit market survey. It has a tiered approach to merit-based increases, and that information came to me from the HR director back in the fall as a method by which the nation could promote merit-based increases as an alternative to having this market survey, because it's my belief, and I think it's borne out by what we're doing here, that this nation cannot afford every 3 years to go and increase wages 16 to 17%. I mean, I've never heard of that in a situation, in a government period, but certainly in a situation where revenues are going down. So I think this would have an impact, passage of this bill will have an impact to the positive of the cash flow.
Mr. Supranov.
So it really doesn't change the definition.
It won't change the amount of revenue we have, it will change the spending.
I would like to point out to the Congress, though, that based on what we learned right here, even with all these things that haven't occurred, but will occur, if it hadn't been for the transfer of surveillance back to, and put that expense back onto the gaming operation, then this deficit would be $4.2 million higher. So we really will have, or are in a position of spending, we have a $10 million deficit if we work with the same numbers as last year. So somebody's going to have to do some severe belt tightening, and we might make it look less by some of these, what I call accounting sleight of hands, but nobody else would call it that. But we're in the middle of the house here, in my opinion. Thank you.
Assistant Chief, and then advise us that we're at 1:21, we have a meeting at 1:30, and we are in motions and notices, we're also in committee as a whole. Acknowledging Assistant Chief.
I would just say that we're going to reserve any further comment until we see Mr. Potts' work. Has the Congress seen Mr. Potts' work?
Councilman Edwards.
So I wanted to ask the Assistant Principal Chief if he anticipates the chief will be transferring any other employees of the nation over to the gaming enterprise, perhaps the boards or any other employees that might go transfer back over to the gaming operation. I mean, apparently if he can do it with this one, he can do it with any. So is there any, will that be a method that we will use to get our numbers down?
I have no such knowledge of any such question.
Okay.
Members of Congress, are there any other questions of Mr. Potts? If not, thank you, Mr. Potts, for your responses. Councilwoman Lovell.
Well, it's not really a question, but it's a comment that you did have a meeting yesterday with Chad Cobb and Congresswoman Edwards, correct? And you all compared numbers, and both of you all, according to Congresswoman Edwards, that both of you all weren't balancing out, correct?
That was me.
Was that you?
Yes.
That both of you, Chad Cobb was not balancing out, and you were not balancing out, and so you agreed to go your separate ways and for you all to exchange information to see where things weren't accurate?
Mr. Potts?
That is correct. It was in reference to a difference in received support budget summaries and how they compare to the received division budgets on September 1. The differences that I identified were sent to Mr. Cobb. Chad and I met. Those differences were prevalent in his numbers as well. I was told that the reasoning for that is individual programs not being essentially part of the division in which we currently have them represented. In that, for instance, you could have the Treasury Department, which administers programs that are prevalent in other divisions. So, for that reason, without that individual support documentation for each individual program account number that a county has, I'm not able to arrive at that number. So I, in cooperation, sent my word to Mr. Cobb with the understanding that we would come back and meet on that topic at a later date.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Ms. Edwards?
One more thing. The law says we need an organization chart as of July 1st of each year, and that organizational chart was then going to assist in determining what budgets went in what division. I think I noticed that the bills, and I talked to the sponsor about this, don't identify what departments, programs, and other entities belong in each division. But that was the whole point of the July 1st organization chart. Have we gotten Are we on the same sheet of music at this point about what entities belong in what divisions? Because I noticed not only did they apparently move entities around, but they also changed the names of the divisions, so that's very confusing.
Mr. Potts?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are differences in budget summary support documentation and how I perceive them to fit into the division organization chart as received by the executive branch on the 15th of July. Again, that is quite possibly miscommunication between executives, especially between Mr. Cobb and I believe those differences can be resolved to at least determine which program account numbers are being funded out of a different division than what we show on the division organization chart.
So did they not send us a list in July? I mean, wasn't that the whole idea? So we would know what goes under what division?
Mr. Speaker, we received a division organization chart, or organization chart of the executive branch, which listed departments and which entity or which division they were to report to. For instance, that would say the Treasury Department, which I believe is an executive administration. That would represent that, and that is accurately represented in the executive branch organization chart. The difference is that the Treasury Department administers program account numbers for entities such, maybe say Scattered Homes, that is funded through the Government Operations Division.
So just because they administer them within a division, they don't budget in that division. So for example, the employee ham program is really not a program of the nation. It's administered, I would hope, through the Human Resources Department, but it didn't come over as showing, that number didn't come over as showing part of the Human Resources Division or Human Resources Department, which is part of whatever executive administration.
I believe in that specific example, the HR department does include employee hams as a program that is administered by the HR department. I don't know that total because the individual program account support documentation is not provided. I do know the total amount provided to the HR department, which I would believe would be accurately represented in the division according to that organization chart.
Thank you. Assistant Chief?
I just want to tell the Congress that it would appear that many of the misunderstandings that have occurred so far are a result of Mr. Potts working in isolation in Congress. And I just want, for the record, to say that if there's any question in Mr. Potts' mind about what goes where in this budget, he's more than welcome to call Mr. Cobb anytime and exchange information, make sure that when Mr. Potts generates information from Congress that it's accurate and it matches as well as possible with what we're doing over there.
Ms. Edwards and then Congressman White.
But Assistant Principal Chief, if it was presented in a fashion that we could have understood from the beginning, or you could have understood clearly, then we wouldn't have, because I looked at what was sent. Well, do we have different administration divisions from budgeting divisions?
There's 3 questions in there, and I think the best way
Now,
to
the first one was a comment. Do we have different administration divisions from budgeting divisions?
I don't get down to that level of
Okay, so if you can't explain it and I can't explain it, then, we're the ones that have to understand it.
I think we had that conversation yesterday.
Thank you. I'll refer back or acknowledge Ms. White.
Well, I know that I've been working closely in the past 5 weeks with our budget analyst. And I know consistently, on a consistent basis, he does contact Chad Cobb or the places in the executive department to request information. This is the same line of, I'm not going to use that word, this is the same type of conversations we had last budgetary session when we were requesting information that we needed to have the tools to be able to do the appropriations of the nation. And we were met with no response back with information. Now, I know that Mr. Potts has consistently been in contact with Mr. Cobb. We have consistently been in contact with the Treasury Department and the Executive Department, making requests for information that are either too overly broad for you to understand or too narrow for you to give us the information that we've requested, because this has happened consistently. So I really object to you saying that Mr. Mr. Potts is doing his work in a dark closet. He's been trying to be very transparent. It's the information that's coming from the executive that hasn't been transparent. So I need to go on the record making that statement.
Thank you, acknowledging Congresswoman Pratt.
I need to go on the record and say I concur with what Congresswoman Wetmore just said. And we have seen, hell, I've seen Chad Cobb several times in the last 5 weeks. And so I know Eli's met with him just as much or more. And, but also one day, again, I'm gonna repeat what I said yesterday, it gets very confusing. Because one day we sat at this table and Chad Cobb, we specifically said, who is here who can speak to the executive branch's budgets? And Chad Cobb was sitting right there and he went. So we had no one. So then, well, that would be Jason, okay? Jason wasn't there. Another day, because we met on a weekly basis at least, right? Well, I felt like it was twice a week. Jason is sitting there. And we went to ask Jason questions because you stated yesterday we could be asking questions all this time. So from what we could try to understand from the mess that we got over and over, we did try to ask questions. And like I said, we asked that day, Chad said, I can't speak to him. He specifically shook his head like that, not me. Well, then Jason comes over and we asked Jason and Jason's like this. Dale, you're Chad Cobb right now. And this was Jason. Turns around and he's like, is that right? Okay, so it gets very confusing who can actually speak to these. And furthermore, we go back to talking about directors. Balancing a budget for federal, state, and tribal is in the director's job description. And in that job description, that is factored into what they're getting paid. So why are we still paying them to have that in their job description and be a part of their duties if they're not allowed to create their own budgets, to talk about what their needs are for their people who they interact with daily, their employees, as well as the people we serve within this nation. What else? This is another reason we talk about we're at 6 million, it keeps going up. I think we were at 4, now we're at 6, a $10 million possible deficit. So would we say something's gonna have to be cut here and there? Well, we don't even know what to cut. We're not gonna probably, we're not gonna talk about direct services, because other direct services, like Congresswoman Buffalo said, to all Osages. So we're not gonna start cutting into that. So what's left? Administrative costs and growing, how much our government has grown and how much we get paid in this area. And I'm sure that if you ask, if the roughly 21,500 and something other Osages who don't work for the Osage Nation and aren't worried about salary increases, they would say that salary increases can go before their direct services. But we don't even know what to cut. I mean, we don't know what is what to be able to cut. You made a statement to RJ yesterday about like, well, why does Congress have to go and cut $100 in pencils and the rest of the division bears the brunt of that loss? And that's not the case. But at this point, we don't even know how much is for pencils, so we don't even know how much to cut out of pencils or anything. We don't know what is what. So even if I wanted to add something, I don't even know what I want to add for because I don't know what any of this money is going for. But I do know that when we did provide our congressional intent anyways, when we went back to that budgeting session where we cut out WIA, $1.3 million in WIA, and we said, this can't happen.
But what we will do is, was it upwards $250,000 to $300,000 for tutoring, so that you can get help for your child when they're making a B, instead of waiting until they're making a D, and no matter where you live. So we put money in, and we were at a meeting over there a month later, and that money was gone. That money was, we kept talking, saying, first of all, the reason we were in the meeting was because the procurement process to even get tutors, they were having difficulty. So there was a big discussion about we weren't able to get tutors. So since we weren't even able to get the tutors, meant we weren't spending money on tutors. So I don't know why all of a sudden they were talking about $30,000 in there for tutoring. So I raised my hand and I say, remember that? I say, wait a minute. Why do we keep throwing $30,000 out when we gave you over $250,000 about a month or two ago? And that money was already gone. So that is the concern here. And I hope people are paying attention and listening, and I don't even know how we're going to we don't know what's for what, and I don't understand why you guys don't want us to know. I mean, what is the problem? I understand there's the court ruling, but why, as Osages, do you not want us to know? It's getting really incredibly frustrating. And again, I don't even know how. I just want all committee chairs to understand that we don't even know where we can go, because we don't know what's what. And I mean, I don't even know what, it's frustrating saying, I don't know. So that's how it's gonna be. So how can we possibly appropriate this? How can we possibly vote on this? So I just want all of us to think about that and remember that. How can you possibly vote on this if you don't know what's what? And if a constituent comes up to you next week and, November 15th and asks why you voted for this much money, I don't know. I'm not really sure. I can read a program plan to you that may or may not be accurate at this point because it's subject to change. Thank you.
Assistant Chief.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to say something I said yesterday. Congresswoman Pratt, you said, I don't know where any of this money is going. You have a gentleman right back here in the room that's head of an organization you spend $500,000 on every year that's here to tell you where all that money is going. So you need to know. I suggest you ask him because he visits every one of these departments every year. I also heard Congressman Supernaw start his sentence with based on, and I heard you use the word assumption. I said earlier, I'm not going to comment any further on Mr. Potts' work until we've had a chance to see it. My understanding from a couple of head nods in the room that all of Congress hasn't even seen it, so it hasn't been scrutinized at all, and I would want to take a look at it before I jump on a bandwagon that says we're $10 million overdrawn this year. So please excuse me if I don't comment further until I see some numbers.
Ms. Pratt.
Mr. Corbin, have you audited every program in this nation in the last year?
No, and it's not possible with, in our risk assessment, there's 180
Mr. Corbin,
budgets.
I'll ask you to come to this podium, please.
I'm asking for this just to clarify that
The risk assessment that we complete to determine where we go and audit according to the amount of risk. For this year, Mr. Potts has got a copy of it. There's 180 budgets that were expended out of in 2015. In other words, fiscal year 2015. 180. That's including prior year, multiple year grants and everything, and in your treasury fund budgets and such. And you can't get to them all. And the thing about our audits, and their concern is the money is to be spent now. We come in and report on history. If there's damage, it's already done when we get there. We just tell you that you had a problem and how much you lost. I can see, on our construction audits, we have assumed a different role. We're doing those concurrently with the construction to stay on top of it. But the programs, we haven't adopted that, and the reason is, a lot of the programs, we've done a partial year, and it reflected bad on them because of the income level varies according to different times of the year, and they took offense to that. And I can side with them and see where their problems are if your income is cyclical in nature. But no, there's no way possible that we could do 180 budgets in a single year. And if it was, it'd still be after the money's already gone.
Would you agree that of all the federal programs, that they're budgeted and controlled by their granting
They are under a contract control. Some of them, if they don't fall within a number factor, dollar amount, they're not audited by your external auditors and very seldom audited by your agency auditors unless there's a problem arises. And a lot of them are just a desk audit where you walk in and you say, let me see your records. And they just pull out the records and show it to them, and that's it. I mean, there's no in-depth to see if they balance or anything. They're not very thorough to just make the answer correct. I asked, I believe it was 2 years ago, your external auditor, they were up here presenting their audit for the year end. And I asked them what the threshold was for the programs. And they danced around the subject and never would give me an answer. But it was basically, if you didn't spend over $600,000 out of your budget that year, they never look at you. And the A133 standards set that. According, they look at what your total expenditures are for the year from the nation entity, and they develop a threshold on what they even come on your federal audits, they even look at. So there could be some that could go for 10 years and never be looked at.
Would you, Matt,
One more time.
would you say that you need a larger scope to fulfill this for the Congress?
There comes a point in anything of checks and balances and controls where does the expense justify what you're susceptible to losing? If your expense gets greater than what your anticipated loss is, then you're overcompensating for your oversight. And that's just, you have to develop that. If you really had a rampant and you were losing millions of dollars, you could afford to expend millions of dollars. But if you're not, then you need to adjust your oversight down because you're spending more than what you're susceptible to lose. It's just a good business judgment.
Don't leave. Ms. Whitemore.
I was just going to ask the Assistant Chief, since you're the representative in this meeting from the executive, do you know where we are on the budget? Can you tell us what the number is?
I sat in numerous meetings throughout the process of getting this budget shoehorned into not just what we perceived to be projected revenue, but what we actually thought was just casino income, program income, and miscellaneous income from the tax commission. So let me go on the record to say I'm going to be very surprised if we miss it by $10 million.
But you don't know where we are at all on overage or shortage with the direct assistance funds figured in and the operating expense of the nation. Do you have a number where we are?
In my head?
Below? No, no.
Well,
Whoever's
yes,
doing
below.
whoever's doing your numbers for you, what is that budgetary number? Where are we?
opinion, but I don't think that's gonna serve any purpose. I'm gonna tell you that we believe, as the chief said when he came up to the podium, that there's, when we're through with our projected revenue and under this budget that we've proposed and sent over here, that the numbers are still left over for the 2 million that's in the cash account. 2.9 million that was returned to the treasurer. That's what he said, so that's what I'm standing by.
Okay, so what
That
I,
is at complete odds with an assumption that we are 10 million in the hole. Now, I watched a lot of this stuff happen, and there were a lot of corrections made. And keep in mind, we've been working on this since mid-March, April, somewhere right in there.
right, we still don't have a stable budget yet.
I'm not going to agree or disagree with that. I'm just saying I want to see the numbers before I assume or base anything on an idea that we're 10 million in the hole with this budget.
Okay, fair enough.
And I would suggest that the whole Congress do the same.
Acknowledging Congresswoman Pratt and Congresswoman Bufflehead and Congresswoman Evans.
I'm sorry, I'll refer them.
Congresswoman Bufflehead.
Well, I want to see the numbers as well, Assistant Principal Chief. And I haven't had the opportunity to look at numbers on a sheet of paper in front of me from both sides, so I look forward to that. But as always, I heard your comment, referring to OFPR, and I put weight into that. It's reasonable to depend on them to help us out with what's going on within our programs and services. And I'm also going to carry weight into what Kelly Corbin just had to say, which says that it's not possible for us to do this. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, that you basically said, well, what if you had more staff, is what I was hearing, or what if you all did more of this? But why would we pay anyone else to do that when that's what we're here for? We're a part of the check and balance system of this government, and paying more people or getting them, OFPR, them, to do more work is something that we 12 can do in the committee. So, to me, that just, relying on, OFPR is a valuable part of our government, but the committee work is valuable too.
Well, now, Assistant Chief and then Ms. Edwards. Your response.
I couldn't agree more. I've served on this Congress. When this Congress met for a few months prior to the session and had all of the directors come in and expended the Congress's time investigating and understanding everything about how the program worked, what was going on, all of that used to happen, but it doesn't happen anymore. I would agree with you on 100%. But I'm telling you, Congress has to commit the time to do that. And I would also submit that if Congress does that, it allows much more time to look at the numbers when we're here and have a context to understand it. I completely agree with you. I think Congress should do that, but I don't think they have.
Congresswoman Edwards.
Well, I had my calendar cleared on July 15th to look at these budgets. From that point going forward, can you tell me why what was delivered on July 15th is now totally irrelevant to a discussion when we set that date, that we would have the time to look over your submission? Why can't we rely on what you sent us on July 15th?
Assistant Chief, if you wish, your response.
July 15th is in a law that Congress wrote that the Attorney General has indicated is unconstitutional, and following the general lines of the Supreme Court decision and the Attorney General, through my own interpretation, simple as I am, that we observe that for the benefit of the Congress. But when we find finding a way to get the casino to absorb certain responsibilities back, through executive order, freeing up a lot more money to spend on the Osage people, that we undertook it. So things change. Things change even from July 15th. Keep in mind, we started these budgets in just about March. There's been extraordinary amounts of manpower and time put into these budgets on the executive side. I observed it. I may not participate in every moment of it, but I observed it. It isn't careless. We're not sloshing things around. It's done with a lot of care. It's a lot of work to continue to serve a growing population of Osages with the same amount of money every year. I would also submit that Congress instituted one major change, which caused no short amount of confusion over there. We went ahead and adopted it in the spirit of cooperation, and that's taking all of the program income that used to be embedded in the budgets and shoving it all the way over here, where now it's part of projected income. That's a major change in how we budget. And we struggled with it mightily over there, trying to sort out every single program measure, get that over here, get it out of the budget, and make it work. I just reject any notion that we somehow throw something together and throw it over here. That's not at all what happens.
Thank you for that information, but my question was, what kept you from getting us a budget on a deadline and for us to rely on? And I think you said, well, we don't believe that we're required to do that because the law that establishes a deadline is somehow unconstitutional.
Let me ask you a question. Do you believe that we are to submit a budget on July 15th and make 0 changes from that time until September 1st?
Well,
yes or no?
yes, without planning, with good planning, yes.
We disagree on that.
Well, but the problem is, as you see it now, when you submit it to us, when it changes every week, right up until the point of 2 days ago, which apparently it's still gonna change some more, then no, we can't do our work until we hear from you. This is what we're gonna propose, and then we're gonna have to work with that. But when you are a constantly moving target, and you won't give us the information that you had, you know, for example, what the current salary levels are of all your employees. Your directors even know that apparently. But Congress doesn't know that because you don't give it to us. And the fact that we can't get the information that we need, coupled with the fact that apparently you guys have found a way to move employees out of the nation, which I'm going to suggest to you could have happened apparently at any time by executive order, given what you're saying, and could still happen today, tomorrow, or next week with any given employee, because I don't see that somehow, came to light when a comment dropped. I mean, you just did it, apparently by executive order. So you did it to free up money, I get that. But doesn't that impose a hardship now on the gaming operation, which didn't have another $3 million worth of salaries embedded in their operation when we borrowed money, when we took a loan to buy a ranch? Everything changed somehow in July, August, I don't know when. But I think it's reflective of some chaos that's going on here at the nation that Congress is trying to sort through, and we don't need any more help with the chaos. So can you give me your promise that no more employees are going to be moving over to the gaming operation between now and October 1st?
Then are included in and affected by 1604?
No, is that your executive order? Are we going to be getting executive order 1605? I mean, I just don't get how employees of the nation somehow just up and moved. I really don't.
Members, they up and move on an executive order, and all principal chief standing bearers executive order did was to rescind that one. So this was a long-standing executive order, and I think I'm safe in saying that it had the full cooperation and input from the Gaming Commission, the executive branch, and the gaming enterprise.
Well, I know what this is getting off the point, but what you're referring to years ago was at the behest of Congress and a specific congressman, if I recall, who perhaps, I'm pretty sure is now the principal chief, and we had discussions about it, And we moved it over at a time when, and then we had fights over how we were going to absorb that impact. And then we discussed with the gaming operation that they would send us additional revenue to fund that position. Now, we're not sending the additional revenue back to them, I take it, that same revenue that now we're asking them to absorb again. So I don't understand. No, we did. So anyway, point being, there's got to be a place in time where you say, this is it for the year, which is the whole purpose of having the projected revenue. This is a point at which we're going to work from. If we keep changing it every week, we're never going to be able to create what the Constitution requires us to create, which is an annual budget in this session.
So, based on what you just said, let's just say that we establish projected, you establish projected revenue.
Not me,
You,
the Appropriations Committee.
the Congress unilaterally,
Yes.
the Congress unilaterally.
No, not unilaterally. If you recall, we had meeting after meeting. We got input from the treasurer. We got input from the tax administrator.
That's not my point. My
Okay.
point is, let's just say that that number is established.
Right.
It's established.
Right.
Let's say we establish that number. And then circumstances unknown to us occur between that point and now.
And what were those circumstances?
Any circumstance that makes the real projected revenue fall.
Okay.
Are we following your lead and sticking with that number?
Well, I think,
The wrong number? Are we doing that?
If-
Or with the situation reversed, are we passing out an opportunity to put more money to work for Osages at this time of year if the situation is improved? I'm hearing you say, whatever we decide in spring, we're locked into.
no.
That's law, and you used the word law this morning.
It is law, and I think that we can change the law. But you bring up an interesting and good point. Can you please tell me that the circumstances have changed to the positive? That's why I asked you, how much additional
Based on
money?
everything I know, the answer is
How much
yes.
additional money are we putting towards direct services to the people since we've had this windfall? And I want to know the answer to that, because that's important to me. Because it looks to me like
I think
the
that
money's
goes
going to
down.
raises and massively increased benefits that we had no input about, that we didn't even know about until these budgets started coming over in July.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt here for a moment and say we are in our open session here. Some of the conversation, all important questions that you have. I think we all, us 12 members here in our house, there's some things at this very moment, this moment in time, that we don't know. And that's what I've been hearing in conversation. There's some unknowns. And Mr. Shaw is a chair of appropriations and exploring and discovering those unknowns for us. Has a report coming, whether it's tomorrow or next day, it's still his appropriations committee. So I'm going to let us go around one more time. If you have any comments or questions, let's do it now, and then we're going to wrap it up. Ms. Edwards, and then
I was going to make a motion, but.
Okay, can I just ask a last question? Because I did set through the month-long saga that felt like it reminded me of the Three Bears, where their porridge was too hot and it's too cold, and that's how I felt with the motions that we were making in the Appropriations Committee. We asked for the original budgets that were submitted and the support documentation, and by motion, we sent it over. And then we get a response back saying, well, that question is too broad. So was it broad first? It was too broad first. And then we sent another motion, after another series of meetings, we go back to motion and say, we hear back that the motion is too narrow because the language in it is too narrow. And then I think the third time we tried it, we included a picture of what we would like brought over to us. So instead of doing this, back and forth and kind of dancing around it, because I have a really hard time to ask former congressmen that either one of you would would be comfortable with any one of our former chiefs refusing to give you information in order for you to do your job to make the best decisions, appropriating, well, over $40 million of the people's money. Why are you all refusing to give us the support documentation that we are asking for in order to do our jobs?
I would refer that question to the President.
Thank you. Congressman Shaw and Congressman Tillman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Assistant Chief. I heard you discuss that through the countless man hours, and I'm not in the most respect, but I have no doubt that it's a lot of hours. You said that as far as the projected revenue you had in sight as you developed the numbers in those budgets was that number that Congress had identified in the spring, plus unappropriated revenue from 2016, which the Chief mentioned in his address, around 1.9 million. And then I heard you mention tribal carryover from 2015, which is about 2.9 million. You added that to the projected tribal revenue of 47,330, and that was actually the target that you were looking to try to come underneath as you totaled up your requested monies in your budgets. Am I accurate?
No, sir. I'm really clear that the entire effort on our side was to ignore the 1.9 million that was left over from the 20 million we got from the casino, to ignore the extra money that was the 2.9 that was returned from 15. We totally ignored that. Now, the result of the executive order 1604 was, of course, treated as savings, and we rolled that into what we did. Our overall cost went down on the gaming commission, and we filled some of that up with some folks that do provide direct services to Osages. Some of it was salary, and there's other things that I'm not familiar with every place that money was allocated as a resource. But thank you for asking that clarification question. That's a very important point.
Mr. Shaw.
If I could continue, I just have one more. It's been said that the transfer of surveillance responsibility from the gaming commission to the gaming enterprise operation saved, I don't remember if it was 2.9 or 3.9, it's like it was 3.9 million in the budget for the gaming commission. Would it be fair to say that savings from the gaming commission is now listed in other items in these requested budgets?
I think that's a fair statement. I'm not sure 100% of it was allocated. I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I believe a lot of it was. We can find out.
Congressman Tillman, and then we'll go to Congressman Edwards if you have a motion.
Yeah, I just have really enjoyed listening to the conversation here today and this afternoon. And I know we're really over time, but it helps me understand a lot of things, and I continue to feel this struggle between the two branches. And it's, to me, it's unfortunate, but I understand that sometimes it's necessary. But I wanted to address Mr. Potts quickly with a comment. Three really quick questions, but Mr. Potts, we rely on you, I rely on you to look at our financial status, to look at our budgets, to advise us as a budget analyst, and your background is, even though you're a young man, but your recent background is embedded in budget analysis, working with Senator Warren, David Warren, the Warren family, came from a reputable work environment, and now you're here with us at the Osage Nation. And I appreciate you being here. You have served me well in my short time here, getting to know you. But three quick questions, if you would. Have you ever made a $4 million mistake?
Mr. Potts, would you please come to the podium?
Mr. Speaker. No.
Second question, it's $6 million mistake.
Certainly not above mistakes, but that's quite a big one.
And you ever made a $10 million mistake?
I don't believe so.
No further questions, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Edwards, you have a motion?
Did you sleep on Holiday Inn last night? Move to come out of the committee of the whole.
Second.
A second, those in favor of the motion signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Thank you, the motion passes. Any more motions and or notices? Councilman Edwards.
I move that the speaker write the treasurer and inquire if he's employed an audit firm without the approval of Congress, and upon, if so, upon what authority, and request a response by the close of business on September 11, 2016.
Form of a motion,
Second.
and a second, discussion here. Senator.
I had some discussion yesterday with some people in the Treasury Department accounting office, and they were unaware that there was a constitutional requirement that an auditing firm be approved by Congress. And I also discussed the procedure that we had employed in the past for approving that auditing firm. If that procedure is not being followed by the treasurer, I'd like to know why, to see if maybe there's an honest mistake or what's happened. But in the past, we've approved the auditing firm prior to the auditing firm being employed. So I'd like to know about that.
Any other discussion to the motion? Mr. Walker.
September 11th, which happens to be my birthday, is Sunday.
Well,
That's my little brother's birthday too.
okay, then I, without objection, change that to September 12th. Happy birthday.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Those opposed say no. Councilman Edwards.
I move the speaker to inquire of a date. The Attorney General might be available next week to attend the Congressional Committee of the Whole to inquire how the Congress should provide her with information that may warrant investigation into violation of Osage law.
It's a motion. Do I hear a second?
Please repeat the motion.
Move the speaker to inquire of the Attorney General of a day next week that she could join the Congress in the Committee of the Whole to discuss the process for receiving information which may warrant investigation into violation of Osage law.
Second.
And a second, discussion to the motion. Ms. Edwards. And then
Well,
Ms. Butler.
I'm hearing a lot, and I'm learning a lot, and I'm going to learn more in committee about things that are going on with budgeting that just don't comport with law. And I don't want to just hold on to that information myself. I don't believe that that's ethically right for me to know these things that are going on and to not report them. Maybe there's nothing to them, but if I feel like I have some information that implicates a violation of Osage law, I want to pass that information on.
Councilman Buffalohead and Councilwoman White.
Doesn't our AG know all of that? I mean, the last AG did.
No, I don't know that this AG knows all this information, but I want to know what the process is for getting it to her, and I don't know what that is.
Any other statement? To the motion, Congressman Whitehorn and Congressman Walker.
To the motion and the last statement that Congresswoman Edwards just made, I had that personal conversation with the AG about having knowledge of things that I didn't think that were going on that I didn't believe was lawful, and she just in that conversation did not have an answer for me. So I think giving her this in the form of a motion to let her know what we're going to ask will help her fashion her response to us.
Councilman Walker, discussion to the motion, please.
That kind of cleared it up.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Those opposed say no. Yeses have it. Any other motions or notices? Hearing none, Speaker, entertain a motion for meeting tomorrow. Mr. Walker.
I'd like to make a motion, but we've got, because of the portrait, we consider meeting at 10:30 tomorrow morning.
Your motion, sir.
No.
I move to, adjourn until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Second.
Second for discussion.
Second for discussion, sir.
Congressman Hamilton, how long do you think the picture will take?
He said he's gonna be set up by 9 o'clock.
And we should be ready.
He's gonna be here at 8 to set up, and I would say 30 minutes to get us squared away for pictures. Hopefully we'll be done and ready to go by 10.
Do you think that gives us enough time at 10 o'clock if we adjourn at 10?
Are you taking the picture a couple
You're
of
not
times?
Congressman Hamilton, yes.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Thank you. Congresswoman Buffalo, discussion to the motion?
Yeah, just typically it has taken an hour since I can remember, from 2010 till now, the congressional portraits have typically taken an hour to get us situated and for the photographer to look to see if all the placement is correct. It takes a solid hour. There's 12 people that he has to get in a portrait, so,
Be here on time.
yeah.
The motion is to reconvene tomorrow at 10 o'clock?
At 10.
At 10?
And be ready to smile, maybe it won't take an hour, so. And be ready to go at 9.
Any other discussion to the motion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying yes.
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 Those opposed say no. Yeses have it. We are adjourned until 10 o'clock tomorrow. Picture day tomorrow at 9.
Congresswoman Edwards, I'm coming.
Thank you.